let's talk about some practical tips of how to make our hospitality consistent and joyful. This is going to be a lot of information, but it's not meant to overwhelm you or give you a to-do list. Again, it's just little small things you can do so that you can stay consistent and joyful in your hospitality. Friends, it's simply sharing with others what you have. We tend to make this harder and honestly fancier than it really needs to be. It basically involves making people feel welcome and comfortable. They should feel as though they're at their own home, but all the work's been done. They don't have anything they have to do. A key principle of hospitality is hosting non-family in your home. It may not be overnight. It may not even include food, but they are present in your space with you. Neighboring looks different for every person, but constructing some general plans for your daily life is really important. It also allows for Good Samaritan opportunities throughout your weeks. Again, the primary purpose of developing our neighboring skills is to lay the groundwork for gospel conversations. We should approach this with prayerfulness, with thoughtfulness, and with watchfulness.
So as we dive into these tips, I just want us to, for a second, circle back and remind ourselves of the biblical foundation for neighboring and hospitality. And that foundation, of course, is the continual call, both Old Testament and New, for God's people to neighbor as they have been neighbored and to show hospitality the way that God has shown hospitality to us. And I'm just going to point you to a couple of passages here that we haven't talked about yet. One would be Titus chapter 1 and verse 8, whereas Paul is laying out the qualifications for elders. He says that all elders need to be hospitable. They need to be known for hospitality. Now you might be thinking, well, Chris, that's for elders. What does that have to do with the rest of us who are in the church? And here's what I would say to that. Well, those elder qualifications are requirements for elders. They're actually expectations for all of God's people. One of the reasons that we know this expectation of hospitality is true for all of us is in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 2, very interesting verse where the author tells us that we are to show hospitality to strangers, because in doing so, some people have entertained angels. Now, you may have lots of questions about that. To be honest with you, I do too. But the truth is that we don't know all that's going on when we welcome people into our homes and we show them hospitality. But here's what I think we can know is that there is a very spiritual things that are going on there, and sometimes we perhaps might miss out if we're not practicing hospitality and experiencing the supernatural. And that's not only in the possibility of entertaining angels, but also in the supernatural possibility of seeing people come to faith in Jesus Christ. And so lots of other passages that we could look at, but in this discussion, we must never stray too far from this repeated biblical command to neighbor and to be hospitable the way that God has neighbored and been hospitable to us.
So, practical tips, again, for making hospitality consistent and joyful. First of all, introduce Jesus early on so it doesn't feel as though you're only being friends with this person in order to convert them. Don't make people feel like a project. We already said that before, but even don't make them feel like a spiritual project. You could include Jesus and your faith in him when you first meet people, people always say like, what do you like to do? And how do you spend your weekends? And introducing your faith in Christ, your church activity, those things are easy to come in right out the gate when you're first getting to know someone. Secondly, it's important to listen instead of talk. Okay, listen to learn and not to speak. And that's really hard sometimes. Doing so, though, will keep you from saying something harmful often or something hurtful based on their backstory. Seek to build common ground rather than having all the answers you need to share in order to fix someone else. Thirdly, live at peace. We already talked about this before, Romans, but if we're nitpicking at our neighbors over earthly things that one day will pass away, then we are prioritizing the perishable over the imperishable. We should never pick a fight, neither should we extend one. Next, number 4, do good things. We see this in Proverbs and many other passages, but look for good things to do for other people. Pay attention to their needs. Pray for opportunities. And then, honestly, sometimes the hard thing for me is I'm like, oh, I should do that for that person. And then I don't follow through. So follow through. Do so even when that neighbor is difficult to love. Number 5, create margins in your life so you have wiggle room and free time to meet the needs of others and honestly, just to love on your neighbors. This is a tough one for me. I'll tell you the truth. When your default is to be productive at all times, margins seem like the enemy. It seems wrong to create space when that is, honestly, we live for the God of production. But a rushed lifestyle does not afford you any freedom to respond to those opportunities you see. Try to avoid the real get to know you questions and conversations during a game or another activity when the other people you're trying to talk to are trying to watch their kid shoot his free throws. Focus opportunities and time when it is also convenient for other people. So place yourself in situations and times when you are more likely to interact with neighbors. Number 6, be predictable, but also be flexible. You kind of want your neighbors, and again, this is everybody you come in contact with, people you're trying to build relationships with, to have a general idea of when they can reach you, when they can come to you, when they have a need. It allows you to have consistent interactions. You don't want to give the impression that you have no time for them. We also need to be open, though, to interruptions. Even in the midst of our predictability, you need to have that space. Number 7, this is going to be hard for some of you. Receive as well as you give. Let people love on you like you love on them. To not do so is to give the impression that they have nothing to offer you. Give and take is healthy. We shouldn't try to cultivate a consumer relationship. Be a normal person with normal needs and allow the chance to show how Christ can make a difference in how you deal with problems. Lastly, participate in neighborhood activities, block parties, garage sales, cleanup weekends. Even when the event isn't yours, show up. Your neighbors are going to be much more at ease in conversations and more naturally open when you do so. If nothing exists in your neighborhood, start something, but start small and involve others in what you do.
Let's talk about some church opportunities that can help you in your hospitality efforts. So these are going to be pretty simple ways that you can use the various environments of our church to help to connect people to the church, but ultimately then to Christ. And so very simply, here's a really, really simple one. Invite your neighbors to church. And that can be difficult at times, I understand. And if so, maybe consider just looking forward to those key holiday services, Christmas Eve and Easter. Research continually shows that most people are open to an invitation to one of those services. But I would challenge you. I think a lot of people these days are open to being invited anytime, and it's relatively simple to do. Second thing that you can do is you can invite your neighbors to your community group. Now, you'll need to do this in conjunction with your community group leaders, making sure that there's enough space, and you're not doing that so your community group leaders, whoever's hosting, is unaware. Probably not going to be good for group dynamics. We really want to encourage our community groups to be a place where people can come to a community group and then come into the church, and I think it's great. We're seeing this more and more, and in fact, in our recent community group training, we were able to tell a great story about a family who got connected to the church and then deeply connected to Christ through being invited to a community group, and we're seeing that more and more, and I love to see that. I think it's a great opportunity. And then here's another one, and really one that I would highly encourage you to consider is to get involved with the City Hope Foundation. And City Hope always has opportunities for us to come and to serve, and it's a great way to love on our neighbors, to have the opportunity to pray with them, to share the gospel, to meet physical needs. And so you can do this through serving at the cupboard. You can do it through the block parties that we have. You can do through the various ministries that City Hope is either has currently going or will be launching in the days ahead. We're hoping to see the City Hope Foundation continue to grow and to spread throughout Southeast Iowa. So that's a really, really great and relatively simple way for you to get connected. And so I encourage you to reach out to our staff there, and maybe even consider doing that together as a community group. But there's lots of opportunities to neighbor through the church, and so you don't have to do this on your own. Much of the structure is already in place, and so consider taking one or more of those opportunities to neighbor and to practice hospitality through the church.